beneath your tongue. Tell me stories, sing me songs. Celebrate desire. Teach me how the heart is wrong. Learn to play with fire. Be here now. Be here now with me.
Hi, everybody. My name's Joanna Lulin, and I'm a lesbian. Are there any other lesbians here tonight? Tonight, I want to reinforce how wonderful it is to be lesbians, how magical it is, how it is so hip. You know, I know it's the political line that we want to put out there because I mean, I know the political reasons, but we want to put out this political line that we didn't choose it, that it's genetic. That we can't help it. I don't know how you say that. I can't help it to put my fingers in a woman's vagina. You know, I keep saying to myself, what's wrong with choosing lesbianism? Maybe some of us were born that way, and maybe some of us chose it. I keep trying to figure out what's wrong with choosing it. I think it's a fabulous choice. What a great idea. I'm so glad someone told me they were lesbians. It was such a blast. I'm such a happy dyke as a result. And so I think that if we had then I think it's okay to say we chose it. I think it's okay to say, you're right, it's about sex. It's got a lot to do with sex. Certainly, there's a lot of straight women out there. That, I mean, when we identified as straight, I should say, not necessarily when we were straight, but we thought we were straight, that came out as a lesbian because of some fabulous sexual encounter. It's not because it was such a great political idea or concept. That it was hot. That it was like, God, are you kidding? Why aren't I doing this? You mean I could do this all the time? What a blast, you know? So we decided to do it all the time. My idea about the lesbian erotic archetype that we have, our three most clear lesbian erotic archetypes are the absent archetype, meaning we don't have any, or we don't know what they are. We're like sitting there going, I'm trying to think of something unconscious and I don't know what it is. And the other two archetypes that we have are butch and femme. Now, when you say those words, everyone goes like, ah, butch, femme. Oh, we're not supposed to talk about that anymore. I thought it's been made illegal by the lesbian police. I have yet to run across, now maybe there's one going to watch this movie, this tape, or there's ones in my audience that are too afraid to raise their hands because no one else is raising their hands. But what I think is really true is that if none of us have escaped putting ourselves somewhere on a butch-femme scale, this is a really important part of our culture when it's universal. Now, it's not necessarily universal that we identify as butch-femme, but we can somehow see ourselves on that continuum, and we just simply don't have other words. When I'm really looking at that homophobia inside of us that has, you know, we could say it's all the straight world's fault, but I think that that's just a cop-out. I mean, at some point we have to cop to how we have colluded in that because of our internalized homophobia. So in that internalized homophobia, I think that what we've done is that we're terrified of that place inside of us that says, I think they're right. There is some terror inside of us that really believes that we are simply an ersatz heterosexual paradigm, which is simply a fancy way of saying that we're this that really and truly deep down inside we're playing boy-girl. People say to me, but butch femme, it's so categorized and it's so, you know, narrow and all that. You know, if you read Joan Nessel's book, A Restricted Country, in which she has a wonderful essay about butch femme, she talks about the whole idea that people have this fantasy that butch femme was very narrow, and it wasn't narrow at all, and that the roles were much more fluid than people gave them credit for. You know, butch on the streets, femme in the sheets. As a very butch friend of mine says, I've seen more ceilings than Michelangelo. The truth is there are certainly no restricted ways for a butch lesbian or a femme lesbian to act. It's that we got into this idea that it fits somehow into the heterosexual paradigm, which I don't think butch femme has a thing to do with male-female. Actually, I think it's very uniquely lesbian culture. I think it's something for us to be proud of. The privilege of being in the closet is over. I don't think it's a privilege that we can enjoy anymore. I think we have to be out of the closet. I think we have to be done with it.
We need to offend 10 people a day with our overt lesbianism. Kissing in movie lines, I mean, picking up your groceries at the grocery store, thank you very much, I'm a lesbian. You could go to all these little, you know, the junior high school and high school tour groups of Girl Scouts. I came here on Girl Scouts if I had only known. If you all had only come down to the George Washington Monument and said, I'm a lesbian, I would have heard the word so much sooner, and I would have gone, what's that mean? What's a lesbian Girl Scout leader? But you could go to the monuments, and just as you're passing by, I'm a lesbian, girls.
We say we've really evolved beyond heterosexuality because we're into more things than just putting things in our vaginas. Well, that may be true, but I think that what we've traded is we say now that orgasm is sex. So if you have an orgasm, then sex is finished. You know when it's finished because you've had an orgasm. If she has an orgasm, then you know that sex is finished. So if each of you has an orgasm, then sex is over. What a blast. And I think that there's so much more to sex than that. I think that this fear that we have inside about that we're just imitating boy-girl sex, and we're not allowed to talk about it, and yet it's the fear we have inside It's like if you want to put your fingers in your lover's vagina and she sees any sort of penetration as male, or if you want to use a dildo, or if you both want to use a dildo. You know, it's like we're not supposed to want to do that. And how do you explain that? How do you explain that? How do you explain that dildo has nothing to do with male? Or, if that really is your fantasy, how do you explain that it's part of your fantasy and you're a lesbian? And this is lesbian sex.
This is how we communicate in 1989 about sexuality. Don't you do this with a partner? You're in bed? That means she likes it. Now, if you happen to be a quiet kid and you're going, and all of a sudden you go, because you're loving it so much, and you're like, and the woman making love to you is like, oh, she's not. So she starts doing all these different things, and then you're going to go, oh, God, I like what she was doing. Oh, well, I'm not going to tell her I like what she was doing, and you're not going to ask her, oh, why she got quiet all of a sudden? All right, well, you're just going to throw all kinds of different things so you can make her make sounds again. It sounds like it's familiar to a few women. Could we say something simple like, no, over a little bit, honey? Up further, harder, softer, faster, slower. Oh, no! Then it might be conscious that we're actually having SEX.
You know, in my survey that I have in my Lesbian Passion, Loving Ourselves and Each Other book, a survey of 1,566 lesbians, in there, I ask how often they have sex in a month, with themselves or with a partner, how satisfied are they with sex, and then I also asked how long have they been either single, casually involved sexually with someone else, or in a partnership, or as a couple. These women most of them are in relationships 3 years and under, and sex drops off significantly after the third year. Significantly. 75% is a significant drop in anything. And yet we say we're satisfied with our sex lives. The way I interpret that is this, is that our sex drops off. We have to say, the party line is, you have to say you're satisfied with sex even if you're not having any. And yet we find ways to get out of relationships in which we are not having sex. And we act like it's the first time the story's ever been told. I mean, how many times has your lover walked out on you, or someone else's lover, whatever, and you go, oh, my God, can you believe Betty left Marion after all these years and da-da-da-da? And one of my first questions is, were they having sex? Are you having sex when they tell me that? Well, no, we weren't having sex. We hadn't had sex for 3 or 4 years. It's like, there's something to that. It's not just a gross act. There's something spiritual about exchanging that kind of energy with one another. That it is so powerful, exchanging who it is that we are with each other. That when we start talking about it not being an important part of our lives, that I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. And I don't necessarily mean you have to be in a couple to do this. I'm talking about lesbians being lovers with other women. I'm talking about being lovers with ourselves. That there's something so powerful about it that I don't think we even know how to talk about that. I don't even think that we know the words because we've repressed it, because the world out there and the world in here tells us not to do that.
This is our 10th year anniversary this year. We've been together 10 years. We've worked together 12 years, but we've been lovers for 10 years. And in compiling, we were compiling this hour show called Anniversary Waltz about our 10 years together. And so we said, well, let's go back and do some of the numbers that we started together in like 78 when we first met, and we'll talk about how we met, and we'll go through the numbers. Well, when we started doing, and we'll say, oh, how funny the numbers are, because they're old. You know, and Lois, when I met her, she was straight or bisexual, right? She was bisexual. And she was with a Spider Woman Theater, who was all straight women at that moment. And
that is until you joined the group.
Until I joined. And then
spread the word, so to speak.
So Lois thought, there was a song Lois did called Stand By Your Man, as Tammy Why Not? And it was, stand by your man, give him 2 arms to fracture, and something warm to beat on, and this whole song about abuse and how we would, and then
violence against women.
Violence against women, and abortion and all those things. And it's just so weird because when we started going through these numbers, I guess we should start doing them again because they were exactly 1989. They were the same. We have the same problems and the same issues now as we did in 1978. AIDS has taken a great focus, naturally, in the gay community. And women's issues have sort of taken a back seat, I think, to a major plague crisis and epidemic. And I think...
well, that's one of the things we've been thinking about a lot, is that we need... we have to become more political. We have to go back to where we were 10 years ago and become feminist with a movement that has priorities and issues and things like that, you know. And we've been talking, in fact, most of the conversations we've been having with women informally has been, you know, that kind of thinking about how can we organize in that direction. And also our work. I mean, our work went away from being very obviously political and went through a stage of being politically incorrect, which I think was also very important because we were reacting against, you know, just another kind of political structure, and becoming more culturally identified, and now I think it's time for us to bring both of those things back together. Feels like for us that there's still some very burning issues. Like in the show Beauty and the Beast, Peggy has this line. The father says, "What can I bring you?" And she's one of the sisters, and she says, "Oh, bring me an older woman. Bring me nuclear disarmament. Bring me the ERA before I die." And it got a big round of applause last night because it's coming back. The need to sort of put those issues back into focus. You know, women's issues, lesbian issues.
Well, I was was in Amsterdam, and I saw this wild show, and I said, these women are from New York, and I'd never met any of them before, and I was from New York. So I went up to them and said, how many in the group are lesbians? And they went.
I was definitely on the fence, and here I was on the fence at this table, with Spider-Woman to my right and Peggy and this whole crowd of dykes to my left. At which point Peggy leans over to me and says,
I said, aren't you really a lesbian? I had never met her before. And she just choked.
On my wontons.
Well, this is what we were really political theater, and you know, we just went around and saved people years. I mean, when you walk up to somebody and say, hey, you're a lesbian, right? It just saves them like 5 years of psychotherapy. I mean, they go all through it in that moment or something. And our kid used to do the same thing. We've raised a kid, Shara, who's now in college. She's 20 almost. And when she also toured with us and with me in Hot Peaches, especially. And she was taught, when she was 6 or 7, she would meet people and she'd shake their hand. We'd say, this is Mary, and she'd go, hi, are you gay? And that's how she, and people used to just go, right? I mean, like, they would have to answer in some way, because it was a kid. You know, you don't just say, forget it, kid, or something. They would have to say either yes or no. It was really interesting. Because we used to do all these political things like, you know, all right, raise your hand if you're gay, you know, and Shara would sit in the audience and people next to her, she'd go, raise your hand, isn't it great, isn't it great? And you know, to get everyone to think how wonderful it was to be a lesbian or gay or something. So this is the mood I was in when I met Lois.
She was on a missionary mission. They were definitely missionaries at that time. And so she says to me, aren't you really a lesbian? And she wasn't even sitting next to me. There was someone in between me. She leans across to this person and says, aren't you really a lesbian? Well, my heart just sort of went, and I said, well, I think I'm bisexual, which was, of course, the worst thing to say at that point in the history of, you know, gay liberation.
So then I said, well, if somebody leaned you up against the wall and gave you no choice, wouldn't you pick one or the other? That was the thing people used to say all the time, right? If you were only going to be with one person the rest of your life, who would you pick?
Oh, Hugh, great. You know, great. This is exactly what I want. She's going to introduce me to her friends. This is the answer I've been waiting for. So I went home that night and cried all night long, I think. And I wasn't really the same after that. And pretty much 2 years to the date, we got together, the two of us.
But I didn't want to be around for her coming out. I was tired of those things. I couldn't go through another woman coming out or a straight woman having fun or something. So that's why I said I'll give you 2 years. You know, maybe in 2 years we could talk or something, because I wasn't into bringing people out.
Yeah, I spent the next 2 years looking for you, actually, going to Medusa's Revenge, which was the first lesbian theater in New York, and they also had dances. And so whenever they had a dance, I went, of course. And I luckily did meet some other women, and I was able to have a few experiences. But I was looking for Peggy, and a year and a half after that, she joined Spider-Woman Theater, and we began working on a cabaret piece, and it was really through that experience of working with her, and of course, whenever she went, along came, you know, hundreds of other dykes. And so I did, in fact, meet some of her friends, and came out with their help. And then after we had worked together about 6 months, and were on tour together while we were on the road, we actually did fall in love.
Well, we have a wonderful life.
We do.
Yes, we do. We do everything we want to do. We don't have very much money at all. However, my mother always told me that if you get up in the morning and you do what you believe in all day long, you're going to have food and you're going to have somewhere to live, and you'll be very happy. And that's basically how we live.
Yeah, we've been very happy. We've done only the work that we've wanted to do, which is our work, which is our voice, our images. We want to create lesbian images. We want to create strong images of women. We want to reclaim forgotten stories. We want to celebrate eccentric people. We want to create lovable and unforgivable characters. We want to create both of those kinds of people into one person. I mean, this is the kind of work that we want to do, and we want to reach lots of people, not just lesbians, but we want, to reach a working class audience. I mean, there's a lot of things that we still want to do that we haven't done, and it's our work, our vision, I guess. And we've basically decided that in order to do that, we have to support that for ourselves. We both come from working class families, and we have a lot of faith in the working class kind of attitude. We like to do our job and get paid.
We believe that the closest thing to pain and to learning and to being able to express yourself is comedy. That people can feel much more when they're laughing than when they think they have to be serious. That it's not much of a distance between laughing very hard and crying, and that's really our philosophy, and that we love our characters.
We also started our own theater company, which is the Split Britches Company. And it's 3 women. It's Peggy, myself, and another woman, Deborah Margolin. And we're very lucky because we have that work. And every piece that we have done since that beginning, we still have and we can still do. The first piece that we did was called Split Britches. That's how we got the name for the company. And it was taken from my 2 great aunts and 1 great great aunt who lived in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. And they wore these undergarments that were called split breeches, and this was something that would enable them to pee while they were standing up in the fields. And we thought this was the funniest thing we ever heard. And we also thought, well, what a great image, really, in terms of, taking power over your life, and also the whole idea of humor, and you could split your breeches laughing and so forth. So we created a piece about them together, and we still continue to do that piece. And that piece really is about reclaiming forgotten lives. And the other thing that we think is important in our work is that women's relationships, and I don't mean just relationships between us, love relationships or friend relationships, but women's relationships to their environment. All you need is a woman in relationship to something or someone to create theater. So in this piece in particular, we really focused on the relationship of these 3 women who lived in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia in the 30s and were very eccentric. We wanted to do it with a certain twist, which became our signature twist of that line that we walk between humor and pathos.
We built the barn, had friends come and help us do the siding and put the tin up. What we basically have built it, designed it and built it. Of course it functions, we call it the barn, but it functions in many ways, providing the basketry studio space for Evan and an office for me, the farm office and accounting office, and then of course the dairy on the whole other side of the barn. So it's a multi-purpose building. We really spend all of our time here, which is why we wanted to design it and have it look in a way that was pleasant to us. We feel like we should, if we're going to work here 18 hours a day, we should have a place that's pleasant to do it in, and we both get a lot of pleasure out of this building. Em describes it as the biggest basket that we ever made.
The only thing average, unfortunately, about most days is the feeding and milking of the animals. We start the day around 7 in the morning. Milking right now takes an average of 3 hours. Then there's the cleanup time, so we finish the morning chores around 1 or 1:30. We start that again around 5 o'clock in the evening and finish again about 1 or 1:30 the following morning.
Primary advantage to the Nubians, to us at this point in time, is that their milk is much higher in butter fat, and we are selling most of our milk for cheese production now, and we are paid a premium for the percent butter fat and protein that is in our milk. We have about a 75% Nubian herd now. Well, the real obvious differences are the Nubians have long pendulous ears and very Roman nose. The Alpines have a dished face and upright, short upright ears. They're very distinctive looking.
Split Creek's Pineland Frost D, and we call her D. My sister's name is D. Dee has done real well for us. She's definitely our best doe, probably one of the best does. Well, definitely one of the best does on the East Coast. Levi's registered name is Split Creek Spindabuck. He's actually named after a thoroughbred, a very high-winning thoroughbred. And he was born on this property 4 years ago, and not thinking we were going to do nearly as much commercially as we have done. We had pre-arranged that we would sell him, and so we arranged to buy him back. And he's done a lot for our herd, and he's one of the better bucks in the southeast. In between the two milkings is an additional kid feeding, because kids are fed 3 and 4 times a day depending on their age.
It's obvious to me, and I think to everyone, that we're able to work very well together, because there is no way that if we were not able to, that we would still be doing it after all this time. I really feel like the work and the relationship is a partnership, and that is reinforced to me on a daily basis. And
Yeah, you can't separate the two anymore.
I can't imagine that I would be doing this with any other person under any other circumstance. That it really is something that is ours together and individually, and that I think maybe it's unusual that both people in a partnership have such a strong interest in the same thing. I think it's right peculiar, probably. But I'm real delighted about it. I think if being this involved with the dairy goats is a disease, then we both have it, and it would not be possible. It would not be possible for me to do what we're doing myself, nor I suspect for Evan to. And I do sometimes feel, though, that we don't see enough of each other.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
People assume that we see each other so much because we work together, and I think that's the biggest complaint we have with each other, is that we don't have any time together. We're together 24 hours a day, a lot of days, even though we do have things that we have to do away from here. But that is our primary objection, is that we don't have any time together.
We're hoping that as the cheese sales increase, that we will be in a position where we can hire more help. And one of the first things that we will do, any help, yes. One of the first things that we will do with the time that's given to us by virtue of having somebody else doing some of the work, is that we will have more time to spend together, to do things considered more recreational and less connected to the farm. But I feel like our bond is exceedingly strong, and that part of that is because we are working together, and working and working and working.
Emily had been involved with the woman that I was involved with back in the 70s. And, of course, I didn't know Emily. I only knew that Emily was the person that called long distance on the phone and made Carla cry. So I didn't think very much of her. I was quite sure I wouldn't like her. And I met Emily in June of 77 for a brief visit while she was on break from school. She came from Florida to Athens to visit us. And we struck it off fine, had a real nice friendship. We didn't see each other very much, and then in July, Carla and I went to Jacksonville, Florida to see a lot of our Florida friends, and Emily came up from Gainesville at that point, and we saw her. And the next weekend, Carla died. So Emily, of course, because of the relationship, was the first person that I called when I got back from the hospital. And I could not have made it through that situation and the circumstances surrounding it had it not been for Emily, and the fact that, of course, she more than anyone else in the world knew what I was going through. And it was a real hard year. And I guess mostly out of guilt, we denied feelings we had for each other for a long time, because we both very much loved Carla. And but we did acknowledge our relationship and and have been together for the 12 years since then. 12 hard years. And in fact, Emily was pretty convinced, not hard in our relationship, but we've come through a lot. I mean, we've lost a lot of family members during that time, and we've had a lot of financial problems, and Emily was quite sure that we would not make it through our second year, and in fact, when we had our 5-year anniversary, she announced to me that, oh Lordy, we've been together almost 10 years. So I'm from not too far from here, and I think I had a better idea of what to expect. I had a better idea of how we would be treated individually and as a couple. And when we made the decision to move back to this area, it was a big decision for Emily, especially. And I think it took more than just a few years for her to feel.
More than 5.
Which is almost 10, as you know. You know, to feel like she wasn't going to get on the next bus out of here.
Very conservative area.
It is a conservative area, and it's from, I mean, there are a lot of ways that class-wise and culturally that it's different than a lot of, I started saying Emily's background, but a lot of people's background. But I think that actually, for the most part, that our business contacts and business associates and the people that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and that we would be dependent on, like the feed salesman and the hay salesman and the local vet, very much respect us, because in this part of the country it is not unusual for women to have carried the farms. The men died off, you know, or killed each other off, and the women historically have carried the farms, and had we moved back into this area in peasant dresses and long braids, we might have had trouble working our way in. But brogans and overalls is not something that they object to, and they respect hard work. And if there is any issue about our sexuality, it is an undertone and certainly not anything that has ever been blatantly thrown up at us in this particular community. Our worst experiences in relation to that simply have to do with the fact that we are so isolated, period, because of our lifestyle and the hours that we work.
Because of our farm lifestyle.
Right, that's what I mean.
Not our lesbian
You're
lifestyle.
right. I don't think that there are many people that are very concerned about our sexuality, and whether that is because of unexposure and lack of education on their part as to what our options as women would be, and that may well be it. You know, I'm sure that they were probably looked at as pity more than anything, as those two poor old souls that don't have a man.
All right.
So.
We are really looking at this part of the operation as the thing that's going to keep us in the business. We don't want to give it up. We've put so much time and effort into these animals, and they're also members of our family. Every doe, every buck, and every kid here has a name, and in fact knows their names. And we are intrigued with them and very interested in seeing how our breeding program is going to progress. And I'm hoping and expecting that the cheese is going to make the difference in whether or not we're able to keep doing it.
The pepper pyramid is the most popular. And anyone that is interested in ordering any of the cheese, if they'll just give us a call or write us either one, we'll get some information back to them about how to order it and how we ship it and what quantities and what the price is.
I have my great-grandmother's face and her laugh, and we all have the same one, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother. And that was really very important to me as a kid, to have that sense of connection that was so visible and solid. And when I decided, I don't know when I decided I wanted to be a writer. I guess I always felt I wanted to be a writer, but when I started really writing, I realized I was writing their lives. I was pulling out all of the things they'd ever taught me and ever told me about their lives, most of which were very interesting. I grew up with my great-grandmother, and I lived with her in Boston until I was 22. And she was a wonderful storyteller, and her family was Native American. And she'd been born in Oskaloosa, Iowa, on Indian land. And so she used to tell me stories about being a kid there and having to eat corn all the time, so she wouldn't eat corn. And I always thought when I was a kid, when you're 10 years old, that seems like a joke, because Indians are something you see on TV. But it was all true. And later, when I started to write, I started to want to write about her life and about my grandmother's life. And so mostly that's what I do. Even when I'm writing science fiction or fantasy fiction or whatever, my vampire stories, they're about our lives as African American women and Native American women in this country. It's very hard to want to be something and not have a reflection for it. I finally figured out one reason that I was having trouble just writing was when I went to see Ntozake Shange's play for colored girls, and I realized that I really wanted to write about women, and I didn't have an example of that, a play, a book that had been popular or sanctioned or even accessible that focused on women and their experience. And as soon as I saw that play, I thought, this is the problem. This is what I want to do. I want to write about women, and if she can do it, I can do it, because I'm a lesbian and I can certainly write about women. So that's when I started really, really concentrating on my writing and really taking myself seriously as a writer and starting to edit my own work and look at it with a tough eye and see what was good. So that's how I came out as a writer. It took me about 15 years to do it, to really accept it, and to accept the responsibility of someone who wants to write but is also political and has a political consciousness, having gone through the civil rights movement, having been an activist in the 60s, trying to figure out how to blend that with wanting to be a feminist and a lesbian activist, and how to keep writing, because although I do write essays a lot, I'm primarily a fiction writer now and a poet, so it's how to make that work reflect the political aspects of my life. And that's been really fun. If you can make it reflect, if you can make the writing reflect your political ideas and still have people want to buy it. When I came out as a lesbian, and I use the term come out as a lesbian because that's what everybody does, but I never really thought about it much, and Mabel Hampton always says she didn't come out because she didn't know she was in. And that's sort of what I always felt. But I finally figured out that I had to make a conscious articulation of being a lesbian, at least to my mother and my grandmother. By then, my great-grandmother died. She died right after I moved to New York in 1971. So I needed to say it. I wanted to be a true adult. I didn't want to have that somehow be the unspoken something. And I got to write about it in this new publication of Coming Out Stories, but it seemed really appropriate to me that it should happen in this kind of offhand comic way, because my mother and my grandmother were nonstop talkers. And this, I don't know when this was, geez, maybe 10 years ago? Maybe 10 years ago, I guess. And, and I knew that every time I went home, I took, a woman went home with me. I wasn't taking boyfriends home, so I figured they had to know. But I just decided one day, we were in the ladies' room in a Times Square movie theater. Seemed perfectly appropriate place to me. And my mother was reading graffiti on the bathroom wall, because my family are, the people in my family are chronic readers and chronic talkers. So they're either reading stories or telling stories. So my mother starts reading off this graffiti, and she's in one stall, my grandma's in the other stall. I was washing, popcorn butter off my hands. And so she starts reading this graffiti, and we're laughing, yucking it up. And my mother says, "Oh, here's an interesting one," or something like that. And I said, "What?" And she says, "It says, Dykes Unite." And so I was like, well, now what shall I do? Shall I just chuckle? Shall I pretend I didn't even hear her? Or shall I segue into my coming out here in Times Square? And so I said, oh, well, hell, don't pass up the chance. So I said, oh, yeah, that's great. I said, but I have this wonderful money stamp. I stamp all my dollars with it when I go to put them in the bank on my desk. You haven't seen that? And my mother says, no, what does it say? And my grandmother in the next stall says, I saw it, it says lesbian money. And they started cracking up. Meanwhile, the theater is letting out and all these other women are coming in, they're looking appalled. And that was our big yuck over that, and that was it. That was it. It was sort of like I wanted them to act like that, and I counted on them going through it like that, and I was really pleased they didn't let me down, And it did make a big difference, because I finally had given them permission to treat me like an adult, and when I come home now with a lover, I get to be a couple, It's not just me coming home with my best friend, and there's a distinct difference, even though they're always very nice to my friends, whoever my friends were. There's a difference when you come home and they act like you're with your partner, and they now have permission to do that, and it's really wonderful. But once I came out, it was really great. My writing just took off, because I had given myself permission to say all the stuff I felt. I could write about women. I could write about loving women, being friends with women. I could write about sex with women. And that became very important to me. My vampire stories are very, very much connected to creating my lesbian reality. Being afraid of that in myself didn't make sense at all. And when I met feminists who sort of didn't want to deal with that, I didn't understand it, and lesbians who just say, well, that's not we don't want to be identified as sexual beings. Well, hey, why not? I mean, gee, we better identify as sexual beings. It's like a black person saying, well, we better not talk about being sexual because they have that stereotype about us as black people, so we better not talk about sex. Well, forget that. Take the power and redefine what kind of sexual being you are. So I like to write about sex in stories, because you can define what part sex has in your life. You can define what attraction is, what sex can feel like, what it means in relationships, in a way that people just don't talk about and don't do. See, and actually one section of my novel took place because of a guy harassing me on the street. Some guy who's just, come on, baby, that kind of shit. And I was so enraged, I really wanted to smash this guy in his face, and I didn't. I just kept walking, so I ended up writing the story, this section of the novel where Gilda, my vampire, gets harassed by a guy on the street, and he lives to regret it. And, so I get to do all the kind of adventurous stuff that I don't necessarily do in real life, although I am more prone to hit men who harass me on the street now.
When I graduated from college, my parents gave me $500 as a down payment for a car. And I
bought a 1961 Ford convertible. It was a dyke's dream. 2 years ago, Barbara bought me one. It was ramshackled, barely running. I couldn't drive it. We've since then started working on redoing it. It's been stripped down to the bare bones and repaired, and is now the color that it was when I bought one. I think the convertible especially was a dyke's car. If I look back on it now, then if I had really analyzed who those girls were in those cars, that all of them were dykes.
You have to tell the story of how we met, because it's actually your story.
I went to work at the Kansas City, Missouri Public Library in 1967. And one of the first things I heard about was that woman who collected those books. And shortly after I went to work there, I got a call early in the morning, and she was on the phone and said, "You're new, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Get a P-slip and a pencil and take these down." At which point she gave me a whole long list of lesbian books that she wanted to reserve when the library got them. And I shortly thereafter started reading every book that she requested, because I knew that I was a lesbian, and I would follow her around when she came in the library. And that was basically how we met. It was two or 3 years later before we actually got involved with one another.
Donna came, volunteered to work for the latter, worked for me, and began running errands for me. And shortly there following, we became lovers, and I left the woman that I had lived with for 20 years, who was also a librarian, and whom I'd met in the same department of the same library, the Kansas City, Missouri Public Library, 20 years before. And after Donna and I started living together, she rose through the ranks of the hierarchy of the Kansas City, Missouri Public Library, and among other duties, became in charge of the department where I found her. And shortly there following, she abolished the department altogether, so I cannot hunt there again.
When I started living with Barbara, Barbara was so well known at the Kansas City, Missouri Public Library that it would have been impossible for me to tell people who I was living with and remain in the closet. So I had to either hide the fact that I was living with Barbara Greer or come out. And I chose to come out because you have to share your life with the people that you're around.
I knew that I was madly in love with my girlfriend. I went on the streetcar, tells you how many years ago that was, down Woodward Avenue to the public library in Detroit, Michigan, scared a librarian, I'm sure, out of her growth. I don't actually remember the event, but I'm sure when I trotted in and said that I was looking for, and I knew the term, homosexual. I trotted in and said I was looking for information on homosexuals. I can't imagine how she must have responded, but since I don't remember it, she didn't die, obviously, at my feet, because that event I would have recalled. The end of the day, when I went home and told my best friend that I was a homosexual, actually. My best friend happened to be my mother, and my mother's immediate response was, "No, because you're a woman, you're a lesbian." And we talked about it, and she said that since I was 12 years old, I was too young to make a decision like this, and that we should wait 6 full months before we told the newspapers. And I've always liked that a whole lot. I knew I was different. I knew I was other. I did not know why or how I was other, and I knew I was superior. And I remember clearly thinking, as soon as I knew that I was a lesbian, that just fell into place. I knew from that moment on that this is why I was different, this was why I was superior, and that everything after that would just be sailing along. And I've done this all my life ever since. Now, it may be that just no one came along and tried to cut my knees out from under me, but I always had the feeling that this is the clear, obvious, I had the conviction, this is the reason that you will always do well, you will always be successful. So I never had the internalized homophobia that seems to afflict a great many people, if not the majority of lesbians, and gay men actually are affected by this. But none of this ever happened to me. I grew up just very positively. Most everything good has happened to me and very little that's bad. And because of that, I've always felt very public about being a lesbian. When people point you out to other people on the street, you are then public. You've been on TV and the papers enough so that people recognize your face.
We had a woman in a place
Oh,
where
we have wonderful stuff, wonderful,
a woman
exciting
who
things happen to us.
at a catering place where we would pick up our meals for the weekend, and once I wrote a check. We had been customers there for years, but I'd never written a check, and for some reason I wrote a check, and the woman picked up the check and said, "You're the Naiad Press women. I want you to know that the women of Tallahassee love and appreciate you."
Very shortly after we started living together, the magazine The Ladder, stopped being published. We plateaued out and could no longer do the magazine, and two women, Anita Marchant and Muriel Crawford, who'd been supporters of The Ladder and been in correspondence with me for several years, wrote to us and said that they'd had the dream of doing a lesbian publishing company, and if they could put up a little money to get it started, would Donna and I do the work. And that's how Naiad Press was born. And it was born in January of 1973, and we published our first book in January of 1974. It took us a year to get our act together.
Actually, they did a lot of the work too, because they did pack books for.
Yeah, in the very early time. Of course, Donna and I were both working full-time jobs all this time. I quit my job and became Naiad's first paid employee in January of '82, 9 years after our founding. Now, that was not tied to the fact that Fault Line was coming out and that we knew before we ever published it that it was going to be a big bestseller, and it was for us a very big bestseller. It's coincidental that we decided to do that. We owe the South a debt. When we moved down here, we discovered that we no longer could bear to work outside the home and or work away from our business. So we quit our jobs and went to work for Naiad Press. Donna joined me in June of 1982, just as we were getting ready to go to the American Bookseller Association meeting that year. She quit her job and joined me as Naiad's second full-time employee. And of course, we've grown incredibly since that time. You know, I love the idea that lesbian money literally is keeping Naiad Press growing like crazy. That in fact, lesbian and gay presses all over the country are growing like crazy. This is wonderful and exciting. We're getting bigger all the time. The New York Trade Press is busy trying to invade our territory because we're getting bigger and more successful all the time. And it's important. And one of the goals that I've had all of my activist life is to make it possible so that anywhere, any lesbian, anywhere, at any age who comes out, in effect, can walk into a bookstore, pick up a book that says, "Of course you're a lesbian and you're wonderful." It's a lot of fun. I recommend
Tiring.
Oh, we've been together 17 years. Because I'm so active, because I do so much, because we run Naiad Press, and because I work like a maniac, everyone assumes that
Amen.
that's the most and only important thing in my life, which of course is not true. I mean, the most important thing in our lives is our relationship. That's really what we're working for and toward. It doesn't mean that I'm any less of an activist. It doesn't mean that I don't feel like I was literally put on this earth to save my people, you know, books to the people, people to the books, and all the slogans and Mickey Mouse. I like being Granny Greer, the head queer.
There was a book that came out shortly after Barbara and I started living together by two guys,
Came in.
two gay men, called "I Have More Fun With You Than Anybody." And I think that that's probably why Barbara and I are together. We have common goals, although she does work harder than I do. But I think we're a nice complement in that I'm pretty laid back and would spend a lot more time doing nothing. And she keeps me working, but I also make her slow down a little and stop and smell the roses. But we enjoy being together, and we enjoy doing things, and we talk all the time. Even though we're very directed as far as Naiad is concerned, we have a diversified personal life, and I think that's a lot of it. We do enjoy working together.
Yeah, and we don't fight, which is also a big part of it. That's very important. Our relationship is our lives. It's what we do. And we actually are going to retire someday. Now, Donna doesn't believe that that'll ever
No, I
happen.
don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell that we will retire.
We wake up in the morning right here, and we sit up like this, and we meditate
we meditate.
together. Then we get up, and then who knows what happens after that. We eat breakfast.
Then we may go until 1 in the morning.
Right, and then we come back and see each other again here. That's why we decided to do the interview here, because this is where we see each other.
Right. Really, the only things that we do together, we're in the bed together.
Right.
We eat breakfast together.
Yes.
We go to the Arboretum together.
Well, we don't do that every day.
No. We look at each other's work a lot.
I'm a lesbian photographer, and I've published 2 books of portraits, primarily different kinds of portraits of lesbians. One called Eye to Eye, Portraits of Lesbians, and the other called Making Away, Lesbians Out Front. I always like to have the L word in there so that people understand what it is. And I'm just about to come up on my 10th anniversary of supporting myself as a lesbian photographer through a mystical, magical combination of things that I've been able to survive doing this kind of work for 10 years, which includes traveling around the country with slideshows that I've put together. And the latest slideshow that I've done was just transferred to videotape, so that was a new breakthrough.
Active organizing for the march went on in well over 200 cities and towns. This unprecedented local effort increased the visibility of the movement with hundreds of benefits and raffles, regional newsletters, billboards in Chicago, and subway ads in Boston. Getting over 500,000 people from everywhere to Washington was a major achievement. People saved their money and scheduled time off work. Amtrak broke its agreement to supply special freedom trains, so rambunctious lesbians and gays packed the regularly scheduled trains. One airline called it the largest rush on one city in 1 week in the history of aviation. And then, suddenly, after a year of preparation, everyone arrived. It was as if all the Dorothys simultaneously descended on Oz.
Remember when you were working on this, the last slideshow about the march, you would say, I didn't understand that I felt like this about the oppression, about the pain that we have all gone through. I never had let myself feel it. And you would call me up and tell me that, right?
Yep.
So we help each other out a lot. I do writing. I write poetry. I write essays. I've published some books of poetry, and I'm working on a book of essays right now. And I teach in women's studies programs, but I teach part-time because that way I have time to do my own writing, and I can travel and do readings and tours. I need people to look at the work that I write, so one of the things that Joan has done that's very useful is to look at the rough drafts of things that I've worked on and just give me some very helpful discussions of what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And of course I write about her. I have a whole series of love poems that I'm still writing.
Well, you published part of them.
I published part of them, but
fortunately they didn't end after they got published.
I wrote this last year for our 7th anniversary, and since we're about to have our 8th anniversary, I thought I would read it. The morning of the 7th year. Joan, your breath drifting on my face in the pale, hollow light, exotic as the hothouse scent of brown striped orchids, familiar as the white abelia thriving by your front door all summer long, sweet invisible breath arching from your nostrils and mouth, to fall like nectar water, to fall like the meaning of sleeping words now spoken. Your breath, I lie here and sniff, delicate, gusty, each breath a reason to breathe again.
I've just learned a tremendous amount from her about how complicated truth is, I think, is one of the things I've learned from you. And I can see in my own work, actually, how my images have become more complex, and in my slideshows, how they have become more complex, both in terms of individual images and how the images are put together. You have to bring something from inside out. I mean, obviously, the reason I work on, you know, lesbian and gay things is because that's what I care the most deeply about. You know, I mean, that is the key factor in my own identity.
Well, but you can know that. It's like this book. You know, I can say to myself, this is a central fact in my life, the fact that I went through the stuff with the children and that they were taken and I felt all this pain, and I can know that, and yet doing creative work based on that emotion always uncovers so many layers that you don't know. I've just finished a new book of poems called Crime Against Nature, which are about my being a lesbian and a mother, two things which people feel are contradictory. I've worked very hard to stay in touch with my children and to be close to them, my two boys, whom I lost custody of when they were very young. This is part of the title poem of that book, and it's based on the criminal statute of North Carolina, the sodomy statute, which was the statute that was used against me. The hatred baffles me, individual, doctrinal, codified. The way she pulled the statute book down like a novel off the shelf, flipped to the index, her lacquer red lips glib around the words, crime against nature, and yes, he had some basis for threat. I've looked it up to read the law since. Should I be glad he only took my children? That year the punishment was not less than 5 nor more than 60 years. For my methods, indecent and unnatural, of gratifying a depraved and perverted sexual instinct, for even the slightest touching of lips or tongue or lips to a woman's genitals. That means any delicate sip, the tongue trail of saliva like an animal track quick in the dew, a mysterious path toward the gates, little and big, or per annum and per os. A pause at the riddle, how tongue like a finger rolls grit into a jewel of flesh, how finger is like tongue, another forbidden gesture, and tongue like a snake. Bestial is in the statute. Winding through salty walls, the labyrinth, curlicue, the underground spring, rocks that sing, and the cave with an oracle yelling at the bottom, certainly depraved. All from the slightest touch of my lips, which can shift me and my lover as easily into a party on the lawn, sipping limeade, special recipe, sprawled silliness, a little gnawing on the rhyme. The law, when I read it, didn't mention teeth. I'm sure it will someday if one of us gets caught with the other nipping. This book of poems, Crime Against Nature, just won a prize. It's a prize given by the Academy of American Poets, the Lamont Poetry Selection. I was very surprised because it was mainstream and because the book is so political. And I do think that the reason the judges were able to choose it was because the gay and lesbian movement and the women's movement have created a climate, an atmosphere, a way of being able to look at things in this country that the judges then felt they could select the book.
Tell about the first time I did my Out of Bounds show at the university, and you and your son came together to watch it. I couldn't believe it.
Right,
the two of
there
them
he was,
sitting in the audience.
sitting next to me. And at the end of this show, there's a long erotic sequence with wonderful music,
Very erotic.
flashing on different naked parts of my body. It's really very lyrical and very emotional and very beautiful. There I am sitting next to my child.
And I'm watching, both of them watching this show. And it was great. He loved it.
He didn't particularly react to that part of it. He liked the part that was autobiographical about you. He liked that a lot. They are both like that. They think it's great. The work that we do is great. They've read the manuscript for the poems. Oh, they think
the
it's
poems
wonderful.
about them.
The poems about them. They have copies of all of our books. They're a big success story, these children.
Yeah.
They really are.
They're a bigger success story than the parents.
Our parents are a moderate success story. I think yours are a bigger success than mine.
I agree.
We've had family gatherings with Joan's parents, my mother, and one of my sons, and then we've had family...
That's like all together.
All at one time.
My parents are from New York. We're all Jewish. Minnie Bruce's family is from Alabama. They're all Christians. And
I was raised a Christian.
So it's
no longer.
Definite culture clash when we put these families together. It turned out to be very easy for us to live together.
Our lives are very flexible. We work really, really hard. But on the other hand, we can stop in the middle of the day and go to bed and make love if we want to.
Right. Instead of the Arboretum, we can just go to bed.
Well, I heard this clipping coming down the hall, and I didn't look to see who was coming, who or what was coming. And the director says, "I would like for you to meet my curator." And I turned around, and there stood Betty in this pretty little suit and her little sweater and her little string bow tie and beautiful gray hair and the big smile with his horse teeth hanging out. And I went, "How do you do?" And it was kind of like, ding, 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 right there. And then I volunteered to work at the museum.
But when you turned around, because I didn't know who was out there. I hadn't even seen you. I just knew that she was talking to somebody, and she was always talking to somebody. And I was back in the library doing my work, and then I came out, and you turned around. Can I really say it? I don't think I had ever really, in my whole life, seen a absolutely gorgeous, full-blown butch in my whole life. And it was just like skyrockets went off all over the place.
And all I did was turn around and smile and say, "How do you do?"
I know.
And by God, she does well. Betty says, "Oh, would you like to see the collection room?" Well, she got me back in the collection room all by myself and kept standing in my space. I couldn't move. Well,
But
that was
didn't
funny.
touch you. I never touched you.
No, but I went home and
you got on the phone.
Got on the phone as soon as I got there and called and said, "Yes, you're right, they are, and they're coming." And Betty tried to tell the director, who was her lover at the time, that it was a mistake to come up there.
I said, no. I said, we should not go to that dinner. It will be a mistake, and we will regret it if we go to the dinner. Because the skyrockets had gone off. She
Right.
had never been to a gay party.
And she had never been to a
She
gay
didn't know what
party.
she was walking
And she wouldn't even admit that she was a lesbian. And she's been muff diving for years.
That was her second big mistake, was
Yeah.
letting you go get the Christmas tree with me.
So we went, and Betty had her clothes to change into, and we went up to the house, and we're changing clothes. And of course, while we're changing clothes, we're peeping at
Taking
each other.
little peeps.
This is one of those things, and I said, if it's meant to be, it'd be just like trying to catch all the water from Niagara Falls in a teacup, because there's no stopping it.
But you didn't say that out loud. You
Yes,
were
I
thinking
did.
that.
No, I told you that when we were getting ready to pull back out on the road from the dirt road we were on.
Why had I been in all your space up there at the tree?
No, I just knew that's what you what I wanted.
You knew that's what you wanted, or you knew that's what I wanted?
I knew that's what I wanted, and I knew you wanted it too. Well, we went over and we got the tree set up at her place.
I had left my clothes at your house.
Yes, and I was in your car.
Yes.
So
I
about,
had unfortunately forgotten to put my clothes
what was that,
back
about
in
9
the car.
o'clock, 8 or 9 o'clock
Oh, it was
at
8
night?
o'clock.
We go back over to my house, and we're up in my bedroom, and one thing led to another. And Betty got home at 1 o'clock in the morning. But I tried and tried and tried to get that belt buckle undone, and she's laying there laughing.
And then what happened after that?
You undid it, and we made love. Oh, God, did we ever make love.
And then what did I do?
Well, we were there making love, and then, by God, this big stone butch here got flipped on her back. Oh, God, did she get flipped on her back. Now, my music, of course, I'm a published composer in liturgical music. And my major instrument was voice. My minor instrument is piano. And if you ever hear me play the piano, you could see why it was my minor instrument.
From the very earliest time I can remember, I loved music, and my parents would take me to church or someplace like that, and there would be music, and I would cry all the way home because I wanted to make music too. So when I was 5 years old, we went and got a piano, and I started taking piano lessons. And I did very well as a little girl taking piano lessons. And then I got to 7th grade, and coming to a bigger school, I suddenly found out I played the piano very well. There was a music teacher there, and I immediately fell in love with her. She was taking music lessons from Basil Tutorsky in Washington, D.C. Tutorsky was the protege of Rachmaninoff. I suddenly got very dissatisfied with my neighborhood music teacher, and nothing would do, but I had to take lessons from Tutorsky also. So I called him up on the telephone, and I said that I wanted to take lessons from him, and he said, and oh, he was the ultimate as a gentleman, you know, and he said, well, you come down and you play for me, and we will discuss it. And I played for Tutorsky, and he said yes, that he would take me as a pupil. And I guess I was in that wonderfully creative period that young teenagers get into all of a sudden. And there is no stopping them. Then I went to Eastman School of Music at the University of Rochester, and then I went to American University, and I got a music degree.
I worked my way through 16 years of college, and I have 10 fields, and one of them is art. The one painting that's hanging here is called Bird, and it's the first painting that I ever entered into a competition, a juried show, and it was at the Huntington 180, and there were 720 paintings sent, and only 125 picked, and mine was one of the ones that was picked, and it hung in the Huntington galleries. The other painting is Firebird, and I did it as a tribute to Stravinsky when Stravinsky died, because I am so enamored with his music. Well, what fascinated me about the comb was the coat, because when I saw the picture of one, it was an adult comb with all the cords clear down to the ground. I had Old English sheepdogs at the time, and I said my second breed was going to be a Hungarian Commodore. And I went and got Ish when he was 6 weeks old.
We do like to play games, and we call them scams. And it's sort of a scam on each other. What's the first one you ever did?
It puts a little fun into the life, because when you're doing a scam, you're really not you. You're somebody else.
Yes.
You have taken this personality, and you're that person.
Yes.
For the evening. And the first one was when I told you to be sure and be at the house at 5:30 after you got off from work.
Uh-huh.
Well, I went down and I fixed the hors d'oeuvres and the drinks and put on a little outfit, a little red silky kind of silky and red silky with black lace on it, and the black hose with the garter belts
And the high heel
and
sandals.
the high heel
and
sandals
The frilly apron.
and full makeup and everything. But I didn't have on any underpants.
I know.
And so Betty comes in and all the candles are lit. And she comes up to the door. And I open the door and I say, well, welcome. And I had a name for the place, but I don't remember now what it was. And she kind of gave me this funny look. And she came in and she sat down. And
That was my first scare.
And I took her briefcase. And then I asked her if she would like to have her drink or the champagne. I even had champagne. The champagne was chilled. And I poured her champagne and handed her the hors d'oeuvres. And I had nice soft music playing. And we had our drinks. And I would come on to her and then back off. And then come on to her and then back off.
Ooh.
And then the music, the records ran out, and I went over and made sure that the record player was on the floor, so when I went to change the records, I would have to bend over, and with no underpants on, and this short thing comes up that here is all of this showing, hanging out. And I changed the records, and then
I'd almost touch you, and then...
And she would almost start to come on to me, and I'd back off, because this was my scam, and I was the one to make the moves. Well, she was sitting there, and I got up, and I came over, and I got down on my knees, and we started making love, and I undressed her there in the chair, and I went down on her. In fact, I don't even think I took her top off. I just took her slacks off. And I went down on her there in the chair, and then I took her in and gave her a bath, drew her a bath, gave her a bath, and then we went in the bedroom, and I gave her a hot oil massage. And then we made some of the most fantastic love ever. There's one thing I still think I ought to do.
What?
Is get your mouth insured by Lloyd's of London.
Yes, I can really tell a butch at 30 feet. I think it's one of the great mysteries of life, but I think femme women, or some femme women, have a built-in butch detector is what I call it, but I pride myself that I still have that from the old days. So it's harder nowadays because some of the wonderful butch mannerisms have been toned down, or they've been adopted by many other women who would be highly insulted if you called them butch women. So, but it's really, that statement is really a testimony to a very developed way of loving over the years that does leave one with some skills, and that's one of my skills. And I could teach it too, that skill of recognition. I don't think it's true that butch femme died out. Women kept loving women that way, but they were not part of the lesbian feminist world. So to lesbian feminists, it looked as if butch femme had, sort of been ashamed of itself and disappeared. But I guess I almost took it as a life mission to show that one could love that way and be a feminist and be connected to all the struggles for political and social change in the world. So it was a hard going for a while. When I first started writing about it, I remember being told by a member of Women Against Pornography, this was at the famous Barnard Conference on Sexuality where it all started, being told that if I wrote about butch femme as history, that was allowed. But if I was writing about it now as an option for women, I was on the enemy list, and that was a phrase that was used. And I've been on the enemy list of one kind or another for most of my life, so it didn't scare me. But I think one of the things I'm most pleased about is that through the discussion of butch femme women and leather women, what's happened again is that there's been some relaxation in our own communal discussions about sexuality without any of these sort of rigid codes. It's never meant to be a discussion of this is the only way to love, but it is meant to say there are many wonderful ways to love. They all are lesbian specific, and they all can be also expressions of a wonderful feminism between us. If feminism means, in this case, a compassionate, non-controlling celebration of each other. So, and I find Butch Femme fits into that wonderfully. Mabel Hampton, with whom I share my home, is, I think, a lesbian miracle. Mabel is 86 years old now. I've known her since I was 10. She took care of me in some ways when I was that age, and now I take care of her. We take care of each other. It's a privilege to live with her. She is lesbian history.
And the time has come for them to push out and stand up straight and fight for what they consider is right. Because I thought it was right. I don't know whether they did or not, but me, I had a different idea. A lot of my friends, the same way, both white and black, stood up there along with me. Anybody that don't like it now, don't pretend you like it, and then walk away from it later. No, you got to stand with your back to the wall, shoulders out.
All I really ask for, and I think all of us, all we ask for, is that there be a continuum of the representation of the diversity of our lives. And all that means is that I want the right for my book and my portrait of how I love to be right next to Andrea Dworkin's view of how we are oppressed, to be right next to a lesbian separatist demand for a pure lesbian space. I don't believe one vision is more complete than the other. I believe all together we form a vision that can change this world. I think censorship, particularly of our erotic selves for lesbian women, is a terrible irony. I understand why it happens. I think it comes from the trap of being a victim. And I have in my own life experience from living through the McCarthy period, from experiences with anti-Semitism, from experiences with being a sexually explicit woman. I have experienced the temptation of not being myself and everything would be easier, right? Of giving in to censorship and what I'm saying, not writing about dildos and, or not writing about sex because Jewish women are seen as sexual and how can I play into that stereotype? And I think I made a choice, and anyone who lived through the McCarthy period knows this choice. You either silence yourself because you're afraid of them, or they silence you directly. And either way, a desert results. And I think I understand why some women are upset with what I do. I also know that I trust my community to take from my work what gives them life. And I trust they will not take what is dangerous. So all I ask for really is the chance to be part of the discussion. As you know, I mean, I define myself as a femme, and realizing there are many different ways to be a femme, or many different aspects of femme identity. So when I was in a married couple for 10 years, that was one way. And since I've been a sexually active single femme who is now trying to work out another kind of relationship, but I want to say a word of support and appreciation for the femme women who have many lovers, who know what it is to have empty beds when they don't want them, sometimes, and who know the next day will bring another challenge to find a lover. I want to say that I just want to salute them as my sisters. I've always enjoyed being made love to with dildos. Now, there was no problem with that in the 50s and 60s, except we didn't talk about it too much, but almost every woman I knew did that. I learned when I joined my first CR group in the 70s that was not an acceptable topic to talk about, because that was the heyday of the exile of penetration. And I love a woman's hands in me. I love fingers, and I love the play of dildos. Now, I realize that that's problematic, and I say that is fine. There are some women who absolutely want nothing to do with them, and that is perfectly their right. I also think that they're wonderful tools of pleasure. And again, I don't have any, all I say is that I would hate a woman not to explore what could give her sexual pleasure with another woman because she feels it's politically incorrect. That to me is a very sad situation. So sometimes, you know, I meet women who are just coming out and things, and I have a drawer full of dildos, and when I think they're ready for it, I just say, now these are some possibilities, and sometimes they love it, and sometimes they, oh no, that's what I'm getting away from. I never see a dildo as a penis. I've been with men. A woman's smallest finger has always pleased me more than the largest cock I ever knew. It has nothing, dildos are not penises. They are wonderful extensions of woman's power in a way, on both ends. So I love the moment when I unstrap my lover from her harness and go down on her, and I love when we put away the dildo after using it for the arousal, whatever reason, and she enters me with her fingers. And I've always found so amazing, I've never captured it, the strength, the erotic strength of hands. I say I cruise women by looking at their hands, as there's just a thrill of, there's some kinds of hands that promise such worlds of love and pleasure. The Lesbian History Archives, which I co-founded with Deborah Adel. I could not have done the work without her, and Judah Swartz, who joined us in around, I think, 79 or 80. A group of us got together, several of us who had come out before the women's movement, and had a sense of a richness of lesbian culture that was already being lost. And so from that beginnings came the Lesbian History Archives, which is now over 15 years old, and it has over 1,000 visitors a year. It has every conceivable marking of lesbian culture that you can think of, from papers to t-shirts to buttons to graphic arts to weavings to songs to photographs to videotapes to film footage to newspaper clippings. Why I did the archives, and I think women from the old days, as I say, would understand this, is because I believed for a short while, when I came out in 1958, everything they said about me. And one of the reasons I believed it was because when I went as a young college student to do a research paper on what I was, a homosexual, I went to libraries and I took a journey in self-hatred. And I swore at that time that was going to change. My sense of having no history, of being a biological, legal, and religious abnormality, which I will never disown, is at the center of my commitment to the archives. In turn, the archives has given me back all the despised parts of myself. It has given me a philosophy of lesbian culture. It has given me a reason to write a book. It has given me, at times, a reason to go on living. It has given me a way of saying thank you to women who have loved me so beautifully in my years. It's given me a way to end deprivation of the most searing kind. It's given me a way to leave a legacy to my lesbian children. The archives is not a reflection of my private life. The archives is a home for all lesbian women of any sexual style, and I really hope that their separations can be kept in a sense, because I wouldn't want women who feel that I don't reflect their desires to feel therefore alienated from the archives. Everybody is a home in the archives.